Greetings, everyone. My name is Tim Gutierrez, and I'm a graduate student in Dr. Patricia Dobson's Communication 510 class, which is Mass Media and Society. And during the semester, we were asked to come up with several ideas that might be good for research projects, research papers down the way. So we put our proposals together, and one of those was about cartels and social media. Those seem to be odd bedfellows, kind of odd going together, but I found that it was an interesting topic that I wanted to research. Now, as I started to research, I went to the library, I went to various libraries to check out what they had online, and I found that there were very few articles, if any, that dealt specifically with cartels and social media. So that presented both a challenge, but I took it as an opportunity. Now, in most cases, I think most students or most researchers might stray away from something like that because there's not a lot of good data or research out there. But I had personal experience to go back to. I also had some interviews that I think were possible with some journalists that dealt with cartels. So I thought, okay, let's try this project, and it would be, in a way, groundbreaking because not a lot had been done on cartels' use of social media. So in this case, we're talking specifically about Mexican cartels. If you don't know what cartels are, they're basically crime groups that can number in the hundreds, even thousands, and they try to control certain areas of the country, in this case, Mexico. Now, Mexico is the country that is our neighbor to the south, with a population roughly of 127 million, and they're one of our allies, although in the last few years, there's been a lot of conflict involving immigration that's coming through Mexico, immigrants that are coming to the United States in search of a better life, but they've been coming by the tens of thousands per day now for several years now, and Mexico up to this point has done very little in order to stop that immigration into the United States. So it's been a matter of contention between the government of the United States and the government of Mexico. For the most part, Mexico, deals in manufactured goods. That's one of their main exports. But some might argue that one of their main exports are drugs, things like marijuana and cocaine, heroin. In the last couple of years, fentanyl, extremely deadly drug that takes very little in order for someone to overdose and die. And that has been a big area where the United States has had some conflict with Mexico as those drugs continue to enter the United States. Now let's get to the topic at hand, and that's Mexican cartels and their use of social media. And the working title for this research project would be Mexican Cartels' Use of Social Media to Intimidate and Influence the Mexican Press. But as you'll see in a moment, they also influence many American journalists as well through social media. As I said earlier, I was not able to find any research papers that dealt specifically with Mexican cartels and social media. But I was a journalist along the border during the height of the drug wars between the different cartels, so I had a lot of personal experience and wrote a lot of stories concerning cartels. I also have friends that were in the media during that time period in Mexico that also had, some stories to tell. And I would, during this research proposal, do interviews with them. So that's some of my research right there. Also, there were several specific events that happened that were covered in the media that dealt specifically with journalists in Mexico that were intimidated. Some of them lost their lives because of some posts that they had on social media. One of the first accounts involved Roberto Mora. He was a journalist at El Mañana, that's in English, The Morning. It's a morning newspaper, El Mañana in Nuevo Laredo. Now, that's the city on the Mexican side of the border. On the other side is Laredo, Texas. Roberto Mora had a huge following, and you could see all his comments that he would get on his Facebook page. And little by little, the cartels realized they could also put the posts on that same social media page, and they could actually turn those into threats against Roberto Mora. And that's exactly what happened. They started putting posts saying, you better stop reporting on this or you're going to end up dead. Ultimately, in 2004, he was stabbed 23 times outside his home. And the Gulf Cartel actually said they were the ones that killed him. And they posted it on social media. Around that same time, I wrote a number of stories about the Zeta Cartel and the Gulf Cartel and their war there in Nuevo Laredo. Well, one of the stories that I wrote about was an incident where one of the cartels hung 9 people on a bridge in Nuevo Laredo. First, they tortured them and they beat them and they assaulted them and they raped them, and then they put him on this bridge hanging as a message. And basically the message said, this is what happens when you mess with the Zeta Cartel. And then it was signed by the Gulf Cartel. I, like lots of American journalists, had posts on social media, primarily on Facebook and Twitter, and I wrote on a regular basis about what was going on the other side of the border. Well, it wasn't too long before the cartels started posting their own messages there on the social media page that belonged to the NBC affiliate where I worked in Laredo, Texas. That's in the U.S. Specifically involving the people that were hanging on a bridge in Nuevo Laredo that I reported about, the Gulf Cartel posted that was actually a plant by the Zetas to make the people of Mexico, the local residents, believe that the Gulf Cartel was doing bad things like torturing people and hanging them on bridges. And they said actually it was the Zetas that had a setup. They just signed it, the Gulf Cartel, to make them look bad. And they insisted that we start to source all the information that we were getting out there on social media and on our broadcast. The problem with that is that you source someone and immediately the cartels would go after them and likely kill them. So back to the threat to me on one of those posts, the person that said they were part of the Gulf Cartel telling me that if I don't source my stories and I don't get my stories right, that I was, in danger of losing my life. I took that as a major threat, although we continued, to have stories concerning Nuevo Laredo. But it was always in the back of my mind, I better be careful. And that's kind of the influence or through the intimidation that some of these Mexican cartels had on journalists, not only in Mexico, but the United States and internationally. So Mexican cartels' use of social media to influence and maybe intimidate most of the time some of the press, not only in Mexico, but also in the United States along the border, would be the topic that I would propose as part of my research. So I hope you enjoyed a little history lesson specifically about, groups of criminals over the years in Mexico, including drug cartels from Mexico that have tried to influence not only the people of Mexico, but also the media in Mexico and on this side of the border. Thanks for watching.